The crown prince fell in love with the mute girl who saved his life and insisted on breaking off his engagement with me. I tried to persuade him kindly. The mute girl has no powerful backers, why not take her as a concubine first? Feeling humiliated, the mute girl took her own life in shame and anger. 10 years later, the first thing the crown prince did after securing the throne was to depose me as empress and exterminate my entire clan. This is what you owe Chuo Chuo. When I woke up again, it was exactly my 16th birthday banquet. The honored guest seated at the top asked me what wish I desired. I only wish His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and Miss Liu to grow old together and be of one mind forever. I bowed piously. Your Majesty, please bestow a marriage upon them. I died on a snowy day. I could have held on until the next spring, but Chu Heng couldn't wait. The dagger pierced my chest inch by inch, and blood soaked the couch. Yet his hatred was not sated. He twisted the hilt, making the cold blade stir my flesh and blood. I was in so much pain I could barely breathe, but I still asked unwillingly, why? I didn't understand. Chu Heng and I had known each other since childhood sweethearts, for more than 10 years. My father and elder brother had been loyal to the monarch and patriotic, supporting him with all their strength, before he consolidated his imperial power. They had already handed over their military authority and voluntarily taken the blame for mistakes, but he still fabricated a baseless charge, sentencing the entire Xie clan to death. Why, Chu Heng? I clung tightly to his wrist. Chu Heng's face was paler than the vast snow outside. Clearly, he was the one wielding the fatal blow, yet his expression looked as if I had betrayed him. This is what you owe Chuo Chuo. He gritted his teeth. Chuo Chuo, Liu Chuo. The memory was so distant that it took me a moment to recall the name, and the delicate, willow-like face that came with it. I couldn't help but laugh. 10 years. So for 10 years, Chu Heng had never forgotten her. So he had blamed her death on me, on the entire Xie clan. Chu Heng, you really are a fool. I didn't get to say the last 2 words before Chu Heng pulled out the dagger. Red blood splattered everywhere, a drop landing on the tip of my tongue. Metallic and sweet, just like the bowl of bird's nest soup my mother had cooked for me, her eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. All those years ago, miss, is your heart hurting again? The overwhelming snow vanished, the piercing cold disappeared, spring was in full bloom, and the banquet was bustling with people. My 16th birthday banquet. Yes, it must have been the heavens showing mercy. One moment I was dying, and the next, I opened my eyes to find myself alive. Not only alive, I had returned to the year I turned 16, the year my elder brother won a great military victory, and my father achieved remarkable feats in controlling the floods, the year I hadn't married Chu Heng yet. No wonder her heart hurts. A mocking voice came from behind. Yesterday, His Royal Highness knelt outside the diligent governance hall all night, begging to break off the marriage with the minister's mansion. Hongyang was about to snap back, but I stopped her. It wasn't just about breaking off the engagement with me. This year, Chu Heng had encountered danger while suppressing bandits, fallen off a cliff, and been rescued by an orphaned girl. The girl was beautiful and gentle. To save him, she had tasted countless herbs, damaging her health and even poisoning her melodious voice, rendering her mute. Deeply moved, Chu Heng had brought her back to the palace. Counting yesterday, he had knelt for 3 days and nights, begging to marry her as his crown princess. Miss, don't listen to the gossip outside. You and His Royal Highness have been childhood sweethearts. His feelings for you. I looked at Hongyang and shook my head. Her words trailed off. Of course, I knew what she was going to say. 3 days ago, I had woken up in the minister's mansion. 3 days was enough to sort out the past and the present. Miss, Hongyang's eyes suddenly lit up, and she whispered, His Royal Highness is coming. I looked up to see Chu Heng in his usual crown prince robes, walking toward me surrounded by a crowd. The murmurs behind me fell silent instantly. Chu Heng and I had grown up together, betrothed even before we were born. When I was young, if anyone dared to speak ill of me, he was the first to stand up for me. When he was punished for his mistakes, I was the first to plead for leniency. Before this, no one had ever doubted that I was Chu Heng's true love, the only candidate for crown princess. But today, on my 16th birthday, he had brought another woman, Liu Chuo was pale and slender, clinging to his side like a frightened bird. After kneeling all night, Chu Heng showed no sign of fatigue. Instead, he smiled and whispered something affectionately in her ear. She looked at me, her expression instantly panicking. She took several large steps forward, and knelt heavily before me with a thud. It was exactly the same as in my previous life. Even the single teardrop hanging on her eyelash was identical. In my previous life, I had been fooled by her pitiful appearance, genuinely trying to plan a way for her and Chu Heng, as a daughter of the Xie clan, and future wife of the crown prince. I had never dared to hope for one husband, one wife for a lifetime. Her appearance had saddened me, but I had maintained my dignity as a noble lady. When Chu Heng had asked to break off the engagement, I hadn't cried or made a fuss. Out of years of friendship, I had sincerely advised, Miss Liu has no relatives in the capital and is physically impaired, though she saved you. The position of legal wife is something even kneeling until your knees break won't earn you. His Majesty would never approve. It would only bring disaster upon her. Your Highness, why not settle for less? Take her into the Eastern Palace first, and in the future. I spoke vaguely. In the future, wouldn't it be up to you to decide? Those few words had saved her from disaster, but brought endless trouble upon me. Thud, thud, thud. In my previous life, I had rushed to help her up as soon as she knelt. This time, I only watched coldly. To my surprise, she began kowtowing without hesitation, each blow echoing loudly. Hong Yang tugged at my sleeve. There were many guests today, all staring in our direction. I brushed her hand away. What was the hurry? Chuo. Chu Heng's expression had turned unpleasant. In just a moment, Liu Chuo's forehead was bleeding, coupled with her impending tears. She looked utterly pitiful. She glanced back at Chu Heng, then at me, bit her lip, and continued kowtowing. I leisurely picked up my teacup. Suddenly, I was curious, how far could she keep up this pretense? Yes, Liu Chuo was faking it. Her muteness was an act. Her pitiful appearance was an act. Even her suicide in shame and anger in my previous life, it had all been a lie. On a quiet street corner in Chang'an, I had heard her melodious voice with my own ears. She was sobbing, begging a masked man, "Master, I'm just an orphaned girl. If I don't use some desperate measures, how will His Royal Highness ever take me seriously? Master, please give me another fake death pill. Master, I truly admire His Royal Highness. I know my status, even being his concubine, is above my station, but His Royal Highness promised me the position of legal wife. I must stir up trouble over this to make him feel guilty toward me. Master, please fulfill my wish, as long as I fake my death once. His Royal Highness will remember the debt he owes me for the rest of his life." What a talented actress. She had fooled Chu Heng. She had fooled me. She had fooled all the nobles in the capital. I had once asked Chu Heng why he was so infatuated with Liu Chuo. I was born the crown prince. Everyone flatters me, curries favor with me. Their respect, their love, none of it is for me. It's all because of my title as crown prince. Even you, Shuyin, if I weren't the crown prince, would you still love me? His question had left me tongue-tied at the time. If he weren't the crown prince, we would never have been betrothed, never have grown up together. How could there be love? Only Chuo. She was willing to risk her life for me without knowing my identity. Shuyin, such pure love, how could I resist? I had almost been persuaded. As a noble lady, I had always thought carefully before acting. I had to consider my parents, my clan. I truly couldn't easily risk my life for someone, but we had both ignored another possibility. Even if Chu Heng had fallen off a cliff, his clothes alone would have revealed his noble status. Whether as a young master, a marquis's heir, or the crown prince, Liu Chuo had made up her mind from the very beginning. She was going to climb this high branch. That's enough. Chu Heng shouted angrily. Silence fell. Liu Chuo trembled, looked up tremblingly, and stared at me with her beautiful eyes. Her meaning was clear. She had ruined my marriage, making me the laughingstock of the capital. She felt guilty. If I didn't speak up, she would never stop. Perfect. Then keep going. I raised my eyebrows slightly, lowered my eyes, and sipped my tea. Liu Chuo gritted her teeth and leaned down to kowtow again. Suddenly, Chu Heng took 2 steps forward and slapped, knocking the teacup out of my hand. Xie Shuyin, you've gone too far. Xie Shuyin, is this the demeanor of the eldest daughter of the Xie clan? Chu Heng glared at me fiercely, startling all the servants around us to their knees. He turned to help Liu Chuo up, gently touching her bleeding forehead. Xie Shuyin, apologize now, and I'll pretend nothing happened. I almost laughed out loud. How naive I had been back then. After uncovering Liu Chuo's lies, I had written to Chu Heng that night, telling him what I had seen and heard, warning him to be careful of her. The next day, Liu Chuo was dead, truly dead. Rumors spread that she had refused to be a concubine and taken her own life in shame. Chu Heng had written back to me, "Thank you for the warning, Shuyin. Those who deceive me deserve to die." After that, the matter was dropped. For so many years, I had thought he had turned the tables on her, killing her. After all, he had always hated being deceived the most, until the moment I died. It turned out that the one who deceived me he had been referring to was me. Xie Shuyin, have you lost your voice? Chuo did nothing wrong. I'm the one who wants to break off the engagement, apologize to her, and I'll let the injury on her forehead slide. I looked at Chu Heng and couldn't help curling my lips. I'd been blind. I'd always thought he was wise and shrewd. Hongyang, is His Majesty in the front hall? I turned to the maid beside me. Hongyang nodded dumbly. I lifted my skirt and walked forward. Chu Heng followed closely. What are you going to do? Father is traveling incognito. He didn't summon any female relatives. Of course I knew that. My birthday banquet as a minister's daughter wasn't grand enough to make the emperor condescend to visit in person. But why was he here? Because my two elder brothers were on the border, sending back victory after victory. Because my father had just controlled the floods, winning widespread praise from the people. Because for 100 years, the Xie clan had nurtured more than half of the court's key officials. Yet the crown prince had knelt for 3 days and nights, begging to break off his engagement with me. His Majesty feared breaking the hearts of my father and brothers. Even as the eunuch announced our arrival, Chu Heng still clung to my heels. Shuyin, don't take advantage of your birthday to beg father for something that doesn't belong to you. I've promised Chuo the position of legal wife. I'll never break my word. If you insist on marrying me, you can only be a concubine of the first rank. I glanced back at Chu Heng, as he'd said. He'd been born the crown prince. His life had been too smooth. He had no idea what the position of crown princess meant to him, or who deserved it. Perhaps my gaze was too cold. Chu Heng froze for a moment. Just then, the emperor spoke from his seat. Shuyin, you're in such a hurry to see me. Do you have something important to say? The hall was filled with guests. I knelt down. Your Majesty, today is my birthday. Dare I beg you for a wish? His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and Miss Liu share a deep bond forged through adversity. I envy them greatly. I fear I might ruin their promise to grow old together and be of one mind. Your Majesty, please revoke the marriage contract between your servant and the Crown Prince, and bestow a marriage upon them. I knelt piously on the ground. Silence fell over the hall. You could hear a pin drop. By evening, the news had spread throughout the capital. The marriage between the Eastern Palace and the Xie clan was likely off. The Crown Prince's desire to marry his savior had already caused a stir. Today, the eldest daughter of the Xie clan, long regarded as a model of noble virtue, had actually begged the emperor to break off the engagement in front of all the officials at her own birthday banquet. It was said the Crown Prince's expression had been quite spectacular. His Majesty had even shouted unfilial son and thrown a teacup at him. Nonsense. Kneeling on the ground, I didn't escape the teacup either. Who gave you the courage to act so recklessly? My father's beard was practically standing on end with anger. Break off the engagement. Marriage is a matter of parental order and matchmaker's word. How dare you, a woman, meddle in it? And you even dared to act presumptuously in front of His Majesty. I straightened my back, not blinking an eye. This marriage was bestowed by the late emperor. Do you think you can break it just like that? You get yourself to the palace immediately to apologize. Say it was a moment of foolishness, that you spoke without thinking. No, I said firmly. No. What do you mean no? Break off the engagement. Break off the engagement. Break off the engagement. Do you think anyone in the capital will dare to marry you after this? I pouted. That's not necessarily true, you. My father pointed at me. I think you're possessed by an evil spirit. He stormed off with a flick of his sleeve. He was right, I was possessed. If not for the experiences of my previous life, I would never have done what I was doing now. I'd been raised to be obedient and proper since childhood. Not only would I never have taken the initiative to beg for a broken engagement, but in the past, I would never have appeared in front of so many male guests in the front hall. But obedience and propriety hadn't brought me a happy ending. For 100 years, the Xie clan had known when to advance and when to retreat. When the court needed them, they charged forward bravely. When the court was stable, they stepped back gracefully. Absolute loyalty had earned them the absolute trust of successive emperors. My father, my brothers, my uncles, they had always abided by the clan's teachings. So in my previous life, when Chu Heng gave the slightest hint, they didn't hesitate to hand over their military power and resign from their official positions. Yet Chu Heng had caught them off guard. Facts had proven that absolute loyalty to a fool was blind loyalty. Miss, what did His Royal Highness say? Hongyang couldn't read, as she applied medicine to my knees. She leaned over eagerly, staring at the letter in my hand. Once, Chu Heng and I had exchanged letters frequently, pouring out our hearts to each other. This time, there were only 4 words. Know when to stop. I curled my lips and threw the letter into the candle flame. Miss, Hongyang panicked. Miss, if His Royal Highness apologizes, just soften your stance. I cut her off. Besides the letter, did any other items arrive for me today? Hongyang froze. Yes. She pulled a piece of white jade from my dressing box, her eyes suddenly lighting up. Today's your birthday. Could this be from His Royal Highness too? My eyes also lit up. I stood up and grabbed my cloak. Miss, what's wrong with you these days? It's so late. Where are you going? Wait for me. Hongyang, stay here. I closed the door, turned around, and walked away. The me of these days was no longer the me of a few days ago. The obedient Xie Shuyan had died long ago. What remained was the unruly Xie Shuyan. The man in front of me was thin and pale, with a mole at the corner of his eye red and enchanting. He was vastly different from the image in my memory. I was sizing him up, and he was sizing me up too. His dark eyes were calm, seemingly casual. Miss Xie lives up to her reputation, beautiful and dignified. His voice was like falling pearls. I smiled at him. His Royal Highness the First Prince also lives up to his reputation, steadfast as pines and cypresses. The corners of his lips lifted slightly. He smiled softly too. We exchanged polite pleasantries, both knowing exactly what the other was thinking. The fruits you sent a few days ago, Miss Xie. He pushed the fruit plate in front of him. They're ripe now. I spread out the white jade in my hand. I've received your beautiful jade, Your Royal Highness. I picked a fruit from the plate. He reached out to take the jade. I closed my palm. His hand paused. I looked at him and smiled. His name was Chu Yu, the Emperor's eldest son, Chu Heng's elder brother. My father was right. The marriage between Chu Heng and me had been bestowed by the late Emperor. It couldn't be broken so easily. But I also knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this marriage had to be broken. On the first day I woke up reborn, I'd tossed and turned all night, searching my memories for this man. He had a high status, a good position, and most importantly, he died young, strictly speaking. He was the Emperor's legitimate eldest son. The Crown Prince's position should have been his. My marriage contract should have been his too, but his birth mother had been weak and died shortly after giving birth to him. He was also in poor health. Before he turned 1 year old, the National Master had predicted that he wouldn't live past 18. Thus, the Crown Prince's position was destined to elude him. In my previous life, he'd lived past 18. But only barely survived 6 more years. Yet he'd clearly had ambitions. He'd never married, never had children. But when he died, the wealth in his mansion exceeded half of the national treasury. One could only imagine what would have happened if he'd lived longer, or been in good health. What do you mean by this? Miss Xie, Chu Yu's dark eyes fixed on me. Xie Shuyan hates fools the most. I raised my eyebrows at him. Before we form an alliance, let me see your capabilities. Chu Yu laughed. It was a real laugh this time, bringing a hint of radiance to his pale face. He slowly raised his teacup and took a sip. exchanging private gifts for the old Xie. This would have been treasonous, but I needed an ally, and a wise one at that. The capital was calm, the rumors spread for a few days, then fizzled out on their own. How could the marriage between the Eastern Palace and the Xie clan be off? The eldest daughter of the Xie clan was destined to be empress. If the crown prince didn't marry her, who would dare? Chu Heng was happy. His Majesty never looked at him kindly, so he simply took Liu Chuo on a spring hunt, with him away from the capital. He naturally didn't notice the frequent transactions between commercial firms over the past month, or perhaps even if he'd been in the capital, he wouldn't have cared. The Eastern Palace wasn't short of money, even if it were. The Xie clan would have filled the gap for him. He also didn't notice the quiet personnel changes in the Eastern Palace. After all, they were just maids and nannies, insignificant. That's it. The letters exchanged between Chu Heng and me had been replaced by letters between Chu Yu and me, but the sickly first prince didn't say much. He didn't reply to this letter. A few days later, a new play suddenly became popular in the capital. A noble young master was rescued by an orphaned girl, and they pledged their love to each other. But the orphaned girl was from a commoner background, and the young master was from a prominent clan who could never accept such a woman as their mistress. Of course, in the end, the two overcame the constraints of society and stayed together in love. At the end of the play, the noble young master declared passionately, "What's wrong with being a commoner? Why can't a commoner be the mistress of a household? Repaying kindness is the conduct of a gentleman. If one can't be a gentleman, how can they be the head of a clan?" The plot was too familiar. As the play became a hit, public opinion erupted instantly. Why couldn't a commoner be the empress? If the crown prince couldn't even repay kindness, how could he be the emperor of a country? The crown prince's desire to marry the mute girl was the mark of a gentleman. The crown prince should marry the mute girl. Almost simultaneously, a strange spectacle suddenly appeared in the forest where the crown prince was hunting in spring. Hundreds of birds circled the horse the mute girl was on, chirping. 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix. And so, when the crown prince returned to the capital, the people lined the streets to welcome him. He held the mute girl in front of him. Full of pride, it's quite clever, using the people's sentiment as an excuse to force the emperor to give in. Moreover, it's a strategy that kills 3 birds with 1 stone. It cuts off Chu Heng's path forward, eliminates my father's way out, and also creates a rift between Chu Heng and the emperor. What's this hundreds of birds paying homage to the phoenix? Just a trick to deceive the people. His Majesty won't suspect Chu Yu, who stays secluded and rarely appears in public. He'll only think these are all the work of Chu Heng. As for Chu Heng, besides excitement, he probably feels that heaven is aiding him. How is it? Not bad, that's it. I smiled. I sent someone to deliver the piece of white jade. You toss me a papaya. I repay you with a precious gem. It's not merely a repayment, but a token of lasting affection. Adding a sentence, Your Highness, why not press the attack while you have the advantage? Miss Xie, have you decided? Of course. Now that the alliance was formed, the first move after rebirth could not allow the slightest hesitation. For Chu Heng and Liu Ruo's blatant display, Hong Yang had been scolding them for 3 whole days, but shameless was the worst insult she could hurl. This time, even rumors had vanished from the capital. Everyone was certain that the marriage between the eldest daughter of the Xie family and the crown prince was doomed to be called off. They were just waiting to see her make a fool of herself. My marriage was indeed called off, but my ridicule, they didn't get to witness. It is said that on that day, the palace was bustling with activity. Chu Heng arrived with several scholars from the common folk who supported the mute woman becoming a concubine. Eyewitnesses to the 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix, as well as several enlightened monks. A crowd of people knelt in front of the Hall of Diligent Governance, a mighty and imposing sight. My father received the news immediately and hurried into the palace with several uncles, elders, and a few disciples. In its 100 years, the Xie family had never been so humiliated. Your Majesty, since His Royal Highness the Crown Prince's mind is made up, please grant his wish. We have no complaints at all. A large group knelt down in succession. For the sake of a mute woman, matters have escalated to such an embarrassing extent. The emperor has been both furious and exasperated. But things have come to this, how could he disagree? He had no other choice. It's just as the rumors in the city say, the eldest daughter of the Xie family, who has been betrothed to His Royal Highness the Crown Prince for over a decade and holds half the court's power, who would dare to marry her after this engagement is broken, ruining Xie Shuin's life like this? How will His Majesty have the face to face loyal ministers in the future? Will the century-long harmony between the Xie family and the royal family be broken because of this? During the stalemate, someone appeared who was unexpected by everyone. Actually, I specifically sent a note to Chu Yu that day. Dress nicely. Don't think my father is always serious. Most judge by appearances, so in the rumors, when that person appeared, his eyebrows and eyes were charming, and he was as elegant and picturesque as a painting, like a celestial being descended from the heavens. It wasn't until he knelt down that everyone reacted. This was the reclusive and frail crown prince, almost forgotten by the people, and when he spoke, he dropped a bombshell. Father, your son requests to marry the Xie family's Shuyi as my wife, a move that broke the deadlock. His Majesty was shocked to realize he had forgotten about a son, who, though physically weaker, had long surpassed the age of 18 predicted by the imperial advisor. My father was surprised to see that in just a few years, this eldest prince had grown to be so refined, far more pleasing to the eye than the bewitched. Between the monarch and his subject, their eyes met, and they understood each other. Only the crown prince, it was said, had a particularly interesting expression at the time, so surprised that he almost stood up. Before he could speak, His Majesty had already issued the imperial decree. The marriage agreement between Xie Shuyin of the Xie family and the crown prince is annulled, and the marriage is reassigned to the eldest prince. The crown prince is to be betrothed to the mute girl, Liu Ruo, and the wedding is to be held on an auspicious day. This matter is concluded. When I received the imperial decree, I felt a long-lost sense of joy. The first move went so smoothly. It was beyond my expectations. This shows that choosing the right allies is very important. I had just received the imperial decree when Chu Heng arrived, finally able to marry a beauty. He doesn't go off to dote on Liu Ruoxing, but instead comes to curse me. I commanded, the crown prince and dogs shall not enter. Unfortunately, only the geese in my courtyard dared to shout those words at him. Chu Heng, outside the courtyard, was furious with rage. Xie Shuyin, I think you've gone mad. I came to remind you out of kindness. Chu Yu is just a useless man. If you know what's good for you, you better find a way to get the marriage annulled, otherwise you'll regret it in the future. I was in a good mood, not even bothering to raise an eyebrow for him. I slowly opened the letter in my hand. When to make the next move, this ally of mine is indeed much more ambitious than that one outside. I picked up the pen. No hurry, please watch a good show, before Chu Heng killed me. He actually said a lot to me, but it hurt so much at the time, I couldn't remember much. The most memorable line is, if it weren't for you, if it weren't for your Xie family, Ruo and I could have been together until we grew old. In this life, there's no me, no Xie family. I'd like to see how he and Liu Ruo manage to stay together until they grow old. Inside the fragrance of tea wafted gently. A plague has broken out in the south. And it's a good thing that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has volunteered to provide disaster relief. But, is it appropriate to bring female relatives along? What's inappropriate about it? The mute girl, although the Crown Princess hasn't officially entered the family yet, she is blessed by all birds and favored by heaven. I heard she also knows medical skills. Maybe she can bring benefits to the people. Tea houses are never short of people discussing current affairs. Is this the good show you were talking about? His Royal Highness the Crown Prince went south to provide disaster relief, bringing with him the mute girl who was not yet married. For a time, the city was full of gossip. I raised my eyebrows and drank tea. Of course, there was more to it than that. Shuyin is as mellow as tea. Fortunately, some people are blind. Chu Yu suddenly laughed. I looked up. This person's appearance is indeed pleasing, especially when smiling. The small mole at the corner of their eye is particularly charming. For several months, we've often had tea together. Their speech is measured and considerate, and we get along harmoniously. It's just that, eyes drift downwards, and they are indeed very thin. seeing me looking at him, Chuyu glanced at my teacup and leaned over to pour tea for me. A prince, engaged in commerce, yet carrying the scent of ink, so silent today. He glanced at me as he poured the tea. It's not that I'm silent. I was thinking about what Chuheng said. Chuyu is just a useless person. Hey, I grabbed him by the collar. Can you have children? Chuyu's eyelids fluttered. He slowly put down the teapot in his hand, raising my eyes. My gaze was calm, but the beauty mark at the corner of my eye was a vivid red. He pinched my chin. Want to try? I really did want to try. If Chuyu can't bear children, wouldn't my whole plan be for nothing? But even if I'm unconventional, I can't test it in a tea house. A month later, the play I invited Chuyu to see finally premiered. The Crown Prince went south to fight the epidemic, taking with him the mute girl he loves so dearly. Unexpectedly, the mute girl contracted the epidemic and showed no signs of improvement for a long time. Anxious, the Crown Prince sent someone to escort her back to the capital. It would have been fine if the mute girl had just returned to the capital, but no one expected the Crown Prince to return as well. The Crown Prince was drugged into unconsciousness by the mute girl with a dose of medicine and brought back. Your Highness already has symptoms, and I'm almost dead myself. How could I leave Your Highness there to die? In her past life, Liu Ruo tearfully pleaded her case on paper. An orphaned girl who knew a few words but had not read much. Everyone could only remain silent. The defeated general was expected to defend the flag and not fall. And His Royal Highness the Crown Prince volunteered to go to the epidemic area. Not only did he not know the severity of the situation and send the infected mute girl back to the capital, but he actually abandoned everyone and ran away himself. Besides, the Crown Prince was not infected with the plague, but only had a common cold. Last time, this matter was suppressed by Father. The officials who went to the epidemic area happened to be Father's students, before Chuheng even entered the city. Father received the news. He stopped him overnight and sent him back, so the matter was not leaked, but in this lifetime, his father was unwilling to help him again. Liu Ruo had just led Chuheng into the city when the capital exploded with gossip. All kinds of condemnations against His Royal Highness the Crown Prince filled the entire city. His Majesty was furious, denouncing the Crown Prince for his improper behavior and unworthiness. In reality, public opinion can be swayed with some money. However, official funds cannot be used for such things. The slow-to-realize Crown Prince finally discovered that, in the past half-year, his private property was either dead or ruined. His private treasury was actually empty. He couldn't bring himself to save face by asking someone for money. He could only let public opinion continue to escalate. Prepare the second move. I sent a message to Chuyu. I'm going to expose Liu Ruo's pretense of being mute. Chu Heng has always firmly believed that Liu Ruo's love for him is pure and flawless. In the previous life, Liu Ruo took him back to Beijing, and afterwards he only sighed lightly. Ruo is just too concerned about me. No one will clean up after him in this life. I wonder if he can still say such things now. Chuyu had long since planted some maids and nannies in the Eastern Palace. With a little trickery, getting someone who could already speak to open their mouth was no difficult task. I had originally planned to make a fuss about a plague to scare Liu Chuo, but before I could even start plotting, someone threw themselves right into the trap. It was said to be an evening. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince had been scolded by the people, scolded by the officials, and scolded by His Majesty these days. Overwhelmed with frustration, he hadn't visited his beloved Chuochuo's courtyard for 5 consecutive days. The Eastern Palace was vast, with an artificial lake and a stone arch bridge. That night, true to her name, Liu Chuo sat on the bridge's stone railing like a willow swaying in the wind. Weeping, she gestured to the Crown Prince. It's Chuochuo who's unreasonable. Chuochuo has implicated Your Highness. Chuochuo is willing to atone for her sins. Your Highness, in the next life, Chuochuo will repay your deep affection. Plop, she jumped into the lake. The Crown Prince, whose love was so intense it bordered on self-destruction, naturally followed right after. But for some reason, whether it was too late, or the Crown Prince had always been blind, he thrashed around in the water for a long time without finding her. To make a play convincing, Liu Chuo really couldn't swim. After flailing a few times, She realized no one was coming to save her. At that critical moment, the instinct to survive took over. She broke her muteness and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Help! Help! Your Highness! Your Highness! Chuo is here." It was said the Crown Prince's expression was once again splendidly colorful. Unfortunately, this was the third time he'd had such a splendid reaction, and I missed it every single time. After that, the Eastern Palace was filled with either angry shouts or bitter sobs. A few days later, another commotion erupted in the Diligent Governance Hall. The Crown Prince knelt on the ground, refusing to get up. "Father, please revoke your order. I want to break off the engagement. My mother had taught me since childhood. As a woman, especially a noble lady, love was dangerous. You could only love someone 70%. You must keep 30% for yourself." Had no one taught Chu Heng this, even as the Crown Prince? Perhaps not. Or maybe he'd just been spoiled rotten since birth. Although the Empress was a second wife, she was beautiful and charming, monopolizing His Majesty's favor. His Majesty had first had a legitimate eldest son who'd been bedridden with illness, then several delicate princesses. It wasn't until Chu Heng was 14 that another young prince was born. Chu Heng had been born taking for granted that he occupied all the royal resources. He also took for granted that everyone and everything should revolve around him. Whoever he wanted to marry, he must have. Whoever he didn't want to marry, they couldn't cling to him. His Majesty was so angry he almost fainted, and directly grabbed the imperial sword. The whole city was in an uproar. He'd been the one insistent on marrying her. The wedding date was imminent, and now he was the one saying he wouldn't marry her. What would the people think of him? What would they think of the imperial orders of their emperor? Of course, he didn't actually chop him down. He kicked him a few times and told him to get lost. And get lost Chu Heng did, straight to my courtyard. At that time, I just tested things out with Chu Yu and didn't want to move an inch. But there were no servants left in the courtyard, and he was pounding on the door so loudly it shook the walls. When I opened the door, I finally got to see the splendidly colorful expression on the Crown Prince's face. As for Chu Yu, he had that sharpness unique to princes in his nature. When he saw I was about to get up, he'd pressed his lips against my neck and bitten me twice. Chu Heng had clearly seen it. His eyes were filled with shock, astonishment, and even a hint of obscurity. It took him a long time to find his voice. "Shuyin, you too." I pulled my collar closed and tilted my head to look at him. I'd grown tired of living a proper life and wanted to be unruly, so what? Suddenly, Chu Heng flew into a rage. "You're not even married yet, do you have no shame? That's not a proper thing to say, brother." Before I could speak, a voice like pearls and jade came from the inner hall. "You've already cohabited with that mute girl without a matchmaker. What's wrong with us?" Chu Heng hadn't expected someone else to be in my room. His face turned red, then white. "Unlike you, brother, breaking off engagements with one person today, another tomorrow. Once I set my sights on someone, I'm loyal to them for life." Chu Heng's face turned ashen. "Also, you don't get to call her Shuyin anymore. You should call her sister-in-law." Chu Heng's lips trembled, but he couldn't say a word. I'd thought he might actually call her sister-in-law. How boring. I crossed my arms and moved to close the door. "Shuyin." Chu Heng held the door open. "Shuyin. Liu Chuo lied to me. Shuyin, it's her who sowed discord between us. This is all her fault. Shuyin, listen to me. A few days ago, I had a dream. It was clearly me marrying you, madam." Chu Yu changed his address directly. "The quilt is cold. I'm weak, I'm freezing. Your Royal Highness the Crown Prince. Why not come in and talk with His Royal Highness the First Prince?" Chu Heng fell silent. I closed the door. Whatever shock Chu Heng had received must have been severe. He fell ill shortly after returning to the Eastern Palace. No more commotion in the Diligent Governance Hall, no more drama in the Eastern Palace to watch. But with the preparations for my wedding to Chu Yu underway at the mansion, I was far from idle. One day, as I was sorting through my dowry, an unexpected guest arrived. As soon as Liu Chuo saw me, she knelt down and burst into tears. "Miss Xie, please go to the Eastern Palace to see His Royal Highness." I stepped aside, pulling my skirt out of her reach just in time. "Miss Xie, His Royal Highness is seriously ill. He can't wake up no matter what, and is calling your name in his sleep. Please go see him, maybe he'll wake up if you do. Hearing Liu Chuo's voice for only the second time in 2 lifetimes was truly rare. I looked down at her from above, not particularly wanting to respond. Miss Xie. You and His Royal Highness were childhood sweethearts. Please just go to the Eastern Palace once. Liu Chuo started kowtowing again. I was being greedy. As long as Miss Xie nods, I'm willing to be a concubine. Miss Xie, I beg you. I just frowned when a cold shout came from beside me. How do you people do your jobs? Letting every stray cat and dog into the mansion. Wow, after calling the Crown Prince a dog once, Hongyang was getting bolder and bolder. Steward. See her out. Liu Chuo was driven out of the mansion and never allowed to enter again. It should have been an insignificant matter, but the more I thought about her words, the more uneasy I felt. Chu Heng was ill, calling my name in his sleep. He'd never been that affectionate toward me. Besides, he'd mentioned dreaming about marrying me the last time we spoke. Could it be that my rebirth was already bizarre? Nothing was impossible. But if he really remembered his past life, where would I go with my third move? Earlier, I'd boasted to Chuyu that as long as he allied with me, 3 moves would be enough to get back what was rightfully his. After dying such a miserable death in my previous life, I'd never let Chu Heng safely remain the crown prince, let alone ascend the throne. I had people keep an eye on the Eastern Palace. Chu Heng had woken up and seemed perfectly normal. Nothing important happened in the Eastern Palace. The entrance to the Diligent Governance Hall was empty. Instead of begging to break off the engagement again, Chu Heng postponed his wedding date with Liu Chuo, but this only made me more anxious. Chu Heng was the kind of person who never gave up until he got what he wanted. Would he have postponed the wedding because he also knew his days were numbered? My third move was scheduled for a night a month later. That night, His Majesty passed away quietly in the autumn wind. Since ancient times, the night an emperor died was the most crucial night of all, but Chu Heng was an exception. He had no competitors. In my previous life, His Majesty had died in his sleep so quietly that the eunuchs hadn't discovered it until morning. Chu Heng had ascended the throne smoothly and without incident, but this life was different. There was Chu Yu, and there was me. As long as my third move was executed well and accurately, kicking Chu Heng out of the picture wouldn't be hard. I prepared everything according to plan, a heartfelt talk with my father, handing over the palace defense map to Chu Yu, writing letters to my 2 elder brothers. The Eastern Palace remained as usual. Chu Heng went to court and returned as always. Liu Chuo continued to cry and whimper. Soon, a month passed. As night fell, I handed a note to Chu Heng. Midnight, see you at the moat. Chu Heng and I actually had some good memories. Before Liu Ruo appeared, Chu Heng would accompany me to the moat to release lanterns every birthday. When I was young, I didn't understand shyness, and I would say my wishes out loud. Within a few days, those things I wanted would be sent from the Eastern Palace. When I grew up, I stopped saying them. But Chu Heng could always find out my preferences from the people around me. He was already there when I got to the moat. One glance, and I knew my guess was right. The eyes of a newborn calf of a crown prince are different from those of someone who has been an emperor for 10 years. Shuyin, it's been a few years since I've been here. He gazed at the dark moat. At this hour, there were naturally no lanterns. I remember that year you slipped down from there. He pointed to a reef below the river. You were so scared you cried. Let me pull you up. Your Highness has a good memory. I smiled. I don't remember. So you came back just to get away from me. Is that it, or what? I glanced at him and said, wait to be killed by you again. Chu Heng's brow twitched slightly. His voice lowered. Shuyin, I wronged you. It was the Chen family. I only found out when I was pursuing and attacking the Chen family that the little maidservant by Liu Ruo's side was from the Chen family. After learning about her plan to fake her death, I switched her medicine and framed the Xie family. I trusted you, so I didn't save her in time, but she actually died. I didn't really want to listen. There was something fishy about what happened back then. It's obvious without even thinking about it. What does it matter if you know the inside story? He's already done what he shouldn't have, so what if she kills herself out of shame and indignation because I advised you to take her as a concubine? I looked at Chu Heng coldly. Chu Heng, the decision of whether or not to take her as a concubine is in your hands. You saw that His Majesty firmly disagreed, and you wavered yourself, didn't you? But because of my one well-intentioned suggestion, my entire clan will be wiped out. I thought. I don't want to hear it. The autumn wind rustled bleakly. Chu Heng gazed at me with deep eyes, then suddenly smiled. I know where the problem lies. He pulled me forward, stopping in front of a large tree. He had actually brought Liu Ruo as well. Her hands and feet were bound, her mouth sealed, and she was tied to a tree trunk. Liu Zhuo's eyes were already red from crying. As soon as she saw us, she wailed, "Wu," her tears falling again. Treacherous ones must be executed. In the blink of an eye, Chu Heng drew his sword from his waist, a fatal strike. This is the true love he constantly professed. The person before me is probably not just Chu Heng 10 years later. Back then, when he killed me, his face was still pale. Today, his sword struck down without a change in expression. I clenched my fists. Did that ease your anger? Liu Ruo's eyes remained open. I averted my gaze. Shuyin, I know I was wrong. Those years, I regretted every day. I built, for you. Shut up. I didn't want to hear a single word more from him. Chu Heng's eyes darkened again. Then he laughed. The third quarter of Cho. You were waiting for this time, weren't you? The third quarter of Cho was the time in the previous life when the imperial physician announced the true death of His Majesty. Shuyin, you think that just because I don't have the Xie family behind me, you can win by bringing in that useless Chu Yu. I will let you see for yourself who wins and who loses tonight. Chu Heng pulled me onto the horse, heading straight for the imperial city. As soon as we entered the city gate, a beam of light rose from the direction of the palace. The signal flares used by the Eastern Palace, probably indicating to him that the emperor has passed away. The horses advanced into the palace gates as if the imperial guards within the palace had already been controlled by Chu Heng. The palace eunuchs looked panicked and knelt upon seeing the horses. A conflict had already occurred. In front of His Majesty's bedroom, there was a dense crowd of people. The East Palace 10 guards had come out in full force, along with the imperial guards. The capital garrison, the Xie family army, scattered among them. Chu Heng pulled on the reins, a thunderous roar erupting. Your Highness, who won and who lost was clear at a glance. Chu Yu was held by the neck by 2 guards from the 10th-rate mansion. My 2 brothers, who had traveled far to get here, had their hands bound, with knives held to their necks as well. The Xie family army knelt on the ground in unison. How truly wretched. Chu Heng dismounted and reached out his hand to me. Come. My queen. I only gazed at him. Chu Heng reached out his hand even closer, his expression so pious. Shuyin, in this life, I want you to be the happiest empress. I glanced at the densely packed crowd and looked up at the moon in the sky. A perfect time. I looked at Chu Heng and tilted my head slightly. Did we win? Chu Heng frowned, scanning the surroundings, a flicker of surprise flashing in his eyes. Was it spotted? The Shixia army is too few in number. Insolent son. Just then, a loud shout came from the front. Who are you calling? Chu Heng looked in disbelief at the person wearing a sleeping robe and appearing at the entrance of the bedroom. Your Majesty. My third move was not actually disrupted by Chu Heng's rebirth, because I know, people always like to judge others by themselves, especially now that he is such a cruel and bloodthirsty tyrant. In his eyes, tonight, I will inevitably use the Xie family's power to occupy the palace, change His Majesty's will, and push Chu Yu to the throne. He wouldn't think of a second possibility, because he was also eagerly awaiting this night, awaiting the day he would return to his position above all others. But I won't let him get his way. From the beginning, my third move was never a palace coup. His Majesty is a good majesty, diligent in governance, loving the people like his own children, and treating the Xie family with utmost respect and importance. Now that you know he will die silently this night, why couldn't you have taken precautions earlier? Chu Heng has only been reborn for a month and may not be aware that since more than half a year ago, His Majesty has been having his pulse checked for his well-being 3 times a day. Morning, noon, and evening, and the medicinal soups used are far more than before. His Majesty's health is actually much better than it was in my previous life. From the beginning, I only wanted His Majesty to become suspicious of Chu Heng. The first move was like this, and so was the second. The third move was to create various illusions, making Chu Heng believe that we were going to support Chu Yu and launch a palace coup once he takes action. Coupled with His Majesty's previous dissatisfaction with him, the removal of the Crown Prince will be inevitable, of course. Here we must thank Liu Ruo. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have known there was such a wondrous thing as a fake death pill in this world. We found her master and experimented a few times, confirming that it was harmless to the body and that the duration of the fake death could be controlled by the dosage. So in the original plan, His Majesty was also supposed to fake his death tonight. After my rebirth, the only thing I did differently was to invite him to the moat. If he had been in the palace, he would likely have noticed right away that the numbers of Xie's army were off. To seize the palace, those numbers aren't nearly enough, of course. His Majesty also cooperated in this night's palace coup. His Majesty trusted Father. Father said that Chu Heng might be harboring rebellious intentions and suggested testing him. So he also decided to test him. He just didn't know the drug would put him in a state of suspended animation. Didn't know this was all part of our unorthodox scheme. I saw Chu Heng again 3 months later, in the prison. The season changed from autumn to winter, and it was snowing. Very similar to the day I died. It was extremely cold in the dungeon. Chu Heng had become much thinner, with iron chains on his hands and feet, wearing a thin prisoner's uniform, leaning against the corner. Actually, he shouldn't have been in such a desperate state, but he had reborn, and his methods in winning over the Imperial Army and the capital garrison were ruthless. His Majesty was utterly disappointed in him, unwilling to even look at him before his death. Yes. Despite using the best imperial physicians and the finest medicines, His Majesty's life was only extended by 3 months. Hearing voices, Chu Heng looked up, then down again, perhaps realizing that the person who came was different from usual. He looked up once more, a glint of light sparkled in his eyes. I entered the prison cell, and he immediately stood up, moving closer as if to take my hand. I dodged away, and his hand froze in mid-air. Shuyin, you still won't forgive me. I couldn't hold back. I laughed again. Shuyin, we both came back by some miracle. This is heaven's chance for us to start over. I don't think so. I kept 3 feet of distance from him. Maybe we both came back because some people died far too unjustly. Chu Heng's eyes dimmed once more. Chu Heng, do you know why, after 10 years of marriage, I never bore you a child? Chu Heng's gaze drifted to my abdomen. Because on the day I married you, Father gave me birth control medicine. The power of the maternal clan was too great. Having a child then would have been ill-advised. It was better to wait until we'd retreated from court affairs before raising an heir. My father, my brothers, my clan, they'd been so loyal to him. But the truth is, we did have a child once. Chu Heng's pupils contracted sharply. When you killed me, I was already 3 months pregnant. Why didn't you? Why didn't I tell you? I stepped closer, lifting my eyes to his. Why would I bear a child for someone like you? Chu Heng's face turned ashen, and for the first time, he showed a look of agony. Chu Heng, I was actually worried you hadn't come back. I was afraid you'd think your death was unjust. I pulled out the dagger in my hand and stabbed it neatly into his chest. Chu Heng stared at me in shock, the pain spreading from his face to his eyes. I looked at him calmly. This is what you owe me. The snow fell harder, covering the palace roads entirely. Chu Yu was waiting for me outside. The road is slippery. He knelt down. I'll carry you. I climbed onto his back. He was really thin. He'd been ill just a while ago. But I really didn't feel like walking. His back wasn't very warm either, only a faint heat emanating from the hollow of his neck. Yet when I leaned against it, perhaps because we'd collaborated so seamlessly these days, perhaps because he'd never asked me a single why, tears fell involuntarily. He suddenly sighed. You're not without people who love you. Is it possible that all the silver I earned was so that when you became empress, the national treasury would be full? And you could live in peace? I jumped off his back abruptly. Hey, now that we've achieved our goal, you're playing the emotional card, trying to soften my heart and back down. Chu Yu touched his nose. Caught red-handed, on the day Chu Yu ascended the throne, he split the imperial seal into 2, as promised. We would govern the country together, deliberating state affairs as equals, but I seemed to have misjudged him. He didn't appear eager to be emperor at all. First, He humbly claimed his energy was insufficient, appointing my father as regent and entrusting most state affairs to him. Later, he simply threw his half of the imperial seal to me too. I actually enjoyed discussing matters with him. Talking to someone intelligent was a pleasure. Half a year later, I became pregnant. He cared even less about court affairs, always following me wherever I went. When asked, he'd say, "Father-in-law is there, I'm at ease, TSK." To think I'd once called him ambitious. The child was born smoothly, a prince. Chuyu was overjoyed, holding the baby all day and refusing to let go. He wanted to make him crown prince immediately. I thought of Chuheng naturally and shook my head. The next year, I wanted to expand the harem. I couldn't be the one to bear all the children, could I? Chuyu actually refused. "I'm in poor health," he said, "please," with the energy he'd shown even when ill. He dared to say he was in poor health. It didn't matter if he disagreed, anyway. But then I found that the half of the imperial seal he'd given me had been secretly taken back. The third year, the child could walk and talk. The palace gradually filled with laughter. I started urging Chuyu to go to the front court. My father was getting old, how could he handle all state affairs alone? I'd wanted half the imperial seal not because I was particularly interested in governing, but because once bitten, twice shy. In the fourth year, I became pregnant again. Time seemed to fly by faster than ever. Occasionally, Chuyu would ask me, "How many years do I have left to live?" See, he was sharp as a tack. Not asking didn't mean he hadn't noticed my abnormalities. Whenever he asked, I'd reply, "Tomorrow, hurry up, when you're gone, I'll use all your silver to raise a palace full of concubines, male ones. You know me, I'm the most unruly." In the fifth year, our second child was born, a little princess. Chuyu's face was filled with joy. He suggested not appointing a crown prince, what about a crown princess instead? I ignored him. In the fifth year, Chuyu turned 25. He'd already lived 1 year longer than in his previous life. To my surprise, I didn't feel upset. After all, my original plan had been to keep the children and get rid of the father. Chuyu, who didn't even require me to lift a finger, was simply perfect. In the fifth year, Chuyu took me to watch the sunrise. As the rays of dawn broke through the clouds, the entire capital was peaceful and serene. On our way down the mountain, I silently took hold of his sleeve. Time was quiet and beautiful, no matter how long or short it lasted. We would cherish every moment.